A few days ago, the world you and I knew changed forever in a way that is moving us to a much more dangerous timeline. And I do not think even people discussing it understand the gravity of how bad things are about to get and how much worse it has gotten just in the last few days. Most people have now heard that last week at the Munich Security Conference, the US announced it's pulling out of Europe, and not only that, even more explosively, that the US was going to have one-on-one negotiations about making peace in Ukraine without Ukraine or any European partners or anyone else. And those negotiations kicked off in Saudi Arabia yesterday, where the US announced some explosive things in a one-on-one meeting with Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, and Sergei Lavrov, the Foreign Minister from the Russian Federation. And it got wild real quick. I can't put it any other way. Not only did Marco Rubio announce that he was going to normalize relationships with Russia, reopen embassies, and the like, he also started talking about how they can have great economic cooperation together in Ukraine. He also talked about how they were going to be opening up further communication and having high-level teams from both of their countries negotiate out a peace deal in Ukraine. No, it gets much, much worse. He also announced that they were going to rapidly move to remove economic restrictions between the two countries, which is diplomat speak for the US is going to lift sanctions on Russia, meaning that they're going to now try to pressure the European Union to do the same. They have effectively decided in one meeting, in a few days, to totally reorientate the United States into what is effectively a pact and what looks to be a strong alliance between the Russian Federation and Donald Trump's United States. Across the ocean in Canada, things are dire, with the US continuing to do the drumbeat every single day, including every day by Donald Trump about wanting to annex Canada and turn it into the 51st state. We need to understand these are not jokes, these are real threats. And this is a dangerous situation. I was listening to a broadcast from the CBC, basically the Canadian public broadcaster, talking with a retired general, and he was grim about Canada's prospects if the US invades. Canada has hollowed out its military just like many European allies, and it is highly dependent upon the US to provide critical defense systems, including most of their air defense. Canada would effectively be rapidly conquered, and it would cost the lives of many Canadians. And what was more chilling to me personally, when questioned about the idea of a Canadian resistance being able to be supported from external partners, he said that due to the incredible defensive shield that operates on a continental defense with the United States, the chances of someone getting in an aircraft undetected would be slim to no. And then he said even using submarines, you would be taking a highly dangerous risk and potentially losing a very expensive asset every single time. He believed that Canada, unfortunately, would quickly have a collaboration government. Canadians would live under tyranny indefinitely until Donald Trump's regime fell. This isn't just isolated to Western nations either. You have to understand that your country probably has a US aid program that is providing some very important service, for example, food aid or HIV medicine or what have you, and that no longer is in effect. People will die, and in short order, from not having food, water, or medicine. And that is happening because of Donald Trump. Donald Trump is actively killing citizens from around the world by his cruelty and his dismantling of the US federal government, which is happening at an incredibly rapid pace. Just in the last weeks, we've seen Donald Trump try to fire hundreds of thousands of US civil servants, and he has already weaponized the US government and created mass censorship across the public and private sectors. This is an authoritarian regime. This is a fascist who is on the march, and this is how it has to be viewed in that lens. The United States is not a responsible ally. It is not a partner that we can trust. It is an adversary when it's under the control of Donald Trump and his MAGA political movement, because it is not just one man. It is a political movement that is broad and vast and interconnected with other far-right movements around the world, as we saw quite clearly in J.D. Vance endorsing the Alternative for Deutschland, the neo-Nazi party of the far-right in Germany for the elections. Just a couple of days ago, we saw once again a connection between all of these far-right figures and conservative reactionaries going together to what was called a post-liberalism conference hosted by Jordan Peterson. The leader of the Conservative Party in the UK went there. Jordan Peterson is literally someone who is a supporter of fascism and Donald Trump's regime, and that is your regular, normal conservative going off to that conference to speak. This also points to the fact that Democratic parties, whether they are liberals, greens, socialists, whatever, should understand that conservative parties, many of them, have signed up to global MAGA, to this global reactionary revolution. and they are not trusted partners. They are actively trying to dismantle the democracies around us. And voters need to understand this as well. When you are voting, you are now actively having an option to choose people who want to dismantle the world around you and rebuild it into an image similar to Viktor Orban's Hungary, or whatever the mess is going on in the US will end up looking like in a few days. We also have to remember that Ukraine is not the only place being served up on a platter by Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. Gaza is also on the table for a joint cooperative occupation of the Gaza Strip. And this has already been alluded to by Russian Federation sources and US sources that the Russian Federation plans to use this to once again re-enter Syria and restart the conflict. If you think this is something that will just affect rich Westerners, you need to get that idea out of your head immediately. We have a world that is forming into strong, powerful power blocks that are working to vie against each other. And there is only one right now that looks to have a chance to help kindle democracy into the next century. And that is the European Union, which dramatically needs to step up on every single level. Right now, European powers are talking about the importance of needing to build up a European army and all of the national armies to fight back against a potential invasion that may be not just on the far horizon or the near horizon, but the immediate horizon. We are talking in the terms of months, people. We are not talking in the terms of years at this point. We have no idea where the future will move because of how quickly things are shifting. We also have to understand we need to abandon these far-right politics entirely. This stupid conversation around being anti-refugee, anti-migrant, anti-LGBT, anti-so many things that is pumped up as fears by the far right. They have managed to convince literal national leaders that trans people are a literal threat to civilization. Do you realize how absurd that this has become? This is what they have done to our political discourse. When what we need is more and more people coming to this continent, coming to Europe, to build a stronger, more powerful force that can not only militarily defend itself, but it can also offer a significantly better standard of living than the faux American-style capitalism that we've allowed to form in the last decades of neoliberalism. We built a wonderful, progressive continent because of social economy, social democratic values, making sure that we were building homes, building things, making infrastructure, constantly spending to build a better world. But for many decades, the conservatives and the far right have screamed, don't spend any money, the government shouldn't spend money, it needs to be a private company doing it out of the blessings of their heart. Those days are over. We're in a wartime now. We live in a time where we need to do things. There is no time to just do things around the timescale of people wanting to profit in private industry. Those days are dead. Austerity is over. We need to spend and make ourselves big, strong, and better than ever, or else we will fold. Pedro Sanchez said it best. Spain can either be a poor and closed nation, or it can be an open and rich nation. Those are the two choices. Finally, it's okay to be very scared. I am terrified about what's going to happen. Every day my mom calls me panicking about how much closer to war that we're getting. It is hard, especially if you live in Eastern Europe, where you or maybe your parents or grandparents all lived under Russian occupation at one point within the last century. I am so sorry to our Ukrainian comrades. We abandoned you. We failed you by not providing you the weapons and logistics and support to win the war. And now we will all face a much larger war, one that could have been avoided many, many years ago. Because at the end of the day, just like we saw in Gaza, just like we saw in Iraq, just like we saw in so many places, if we do not enforce the rules-based world order and not allow anyone to cheat at it, even the United States of America, then we have nothing. It quickly crumbles, and we go back to the 19th century again, an infinite great power war. And that was not a good time for the left or democracy or anyone in the world. We don't want the second 19th century, and we want to have a graveyard of empires for our future, not one of infinite ones. But please, please, please repost, share, like, do some engagement, or else I won't get paid or no one's going to see it.